Hi everyone, I'm here to do a very simple watercolor today, and it's kind of a sunset scenery, and I'm going to be using really a few colors today, and I'm not going to be making a drawing. I'll just make a rough outline of what I'm going to paint. So almost a little lower than halfway of your sheet. This is a very small sheet. It's only 5 by 7 inches, and I have it in the landscape format. And a little below the halfway mark, I'm going to have a line that kinds of goes from left to right, just a simple line. And then there is going to be another line which is going from the left in a slope. So that's all I'm going to be doing, and I'll leave most of it for the sky, which is going to be the highlight of this painting. So I'll start by using some ultramarine blue. I have some ultramarine blue here, and I will use a little bit of my Payne's Gray, and I'll use a little bit of phthalo blue, sorry. So I'll start by doing the sky first. I might need a little bit of the cerulean blue as well for the sky. So in this painting, the sky is going to have clouds from this side, and this side is going to be more blue. So I'll start by putting in, I'm using two brushes today, only two brushes. So one is a flat brush like this, the other one is a round brush. So that's all. So I'm going to be using some water right over my page to wet my page, and I'm going to wet my page entirely. The entire page is going to be wet. Try and put more water. There shouldn't be any dry spots. And I know you can see the masking tape that I'm using is actually the second time I'm using it. I'm trying to use it more than once to save myself from going out to buy it. So there are little bit black spots on the sides, but that's okay. So I'll begin by using the clouds on this part will be white. So I'll be using the blue from the right towards the left, leaving out the white parts. So I'll start by using a little bit of my cerulean blue, which is this shade, and I'll mix in my ultramarine blue to that to make it a really bright blue. So I'll start from this side. This side of the sky is really bright. And I'll start leaving some white spaces which are like clouds. So I'm going to be putting my blue strokes this way, but I leave out white gaps for the clouds. And I'm trying to put my strokes such that it's in this direction, as if the clouds are floating from this side to the left to the right. So this side is really blue, and as I'm moving this side, there are more whites. Okay, so that's the sky. And your water is on the paper, so if you put small dots of blue, the white areas will look more like clouds. And I'm going to be using the same thing for the bottom here as well. So only this part, because this is kind of a body of water and it's reflecting the sky. So I want it to be more bluer on this side. And remember that the paper has to be really wet when you do this, because if it dries off, it's going to leave the marks and that's not going to look very nice. So that's more or less done. Okay, so this is done, and now we just wait for the paint to dry. In the meantime, I'll show you the other color that I'll be using. So I have a bunch of colors on my plate. I'm not going to be using so many of them. So I'll just be using this Payne's Gray here. And I'll mix a little bit of the blue, the ultramarine blue, with my Payne's Gray. So we don't usually use black in our watercolor paintings. That looks really dull when it dries. So I'll use the blue mixed with the Payne's Gray to add some depth and variety to my dark areas. So it's really really dark grayish bluish kind of a paint that I've created here. You can see this, and I will use this for the trees that I'm going to make. So let me tell you a little bit about the scenery here. So this is the sky and this is the water. It's kind of a river. It's actually a lake. It's going from this side to this side. This is the distant lake, so it's kind of getting tapered off here. And this is the foreground. This white triangle here, this is the foreground, and we will keep this foreground. This foreground will have trees, and where the sky meets the lake, there's going to be some more land here, which is in the distance, and there will be some more trees here as well. And there will be reflection of these trees in the water below. So that's precisely what we are going to do. So let me show you how I'm going to start with the foreground, because this part is dry compared to the blues here, and I don't want to bring in my darker shades right away, because these darker shades will be the trees and I don't want them getting mixed up into the sky. So I'll start by using this Payne's Gray and ultramarine blue mixture, but to keep things a little more interesting, I'll put in a little bit of my sap green as well. You can mix in some yellows to make this color. So I'm trying to use different shades of the dark. So when it's a sunset, everything looks black, but I'm not going to put only black here. So I'll start by putting in this greenish kind of shade here. You can even put some browns like this. So I like keeping my darks interesting and not putting in the same shade. So this is kind of a mixture of grays and blues and browns here, and I gradually move to my Payne's gray, which is the darkest color here that I'm using, and I'm trying to cover up this triangle but not entirely. So what I'm going to be doing is I'll start making the plants and the grasses, the bushes, everything. Okay, so there are a few of these small trees here, so I'm just putting straight strokes and going from large to small. I'm going and making another bigger tree. So just a few strokes here and there, making it look like a tree. And there are grasses here, shrubs and trees and grasses. Make sure that your blue has completely dried before you put on this color. I'm just putting some upward strokes, like making the grasses here, and I have even more trees on this side. And there's like this larger tree here. And I'm trying to use just the tip of my brush so that I get really thin lines. There are a number of trees, and don't use too much water because that's going to make my tree branches really thicker. It's almost like a dry brushing that I'm doing at the moment. So that's this part. So now some more grasses here. So now I'll do the other piece of land which is at the back. So the line which we had drawn in the beginning, we're just covering with a darker color, and these are the distant foliage that we have. So we don't make it all the same size, so some will be bigger, some will be smaller, and have some variety. And now the final part. So we have, these are the trees, making them a little more taller. So there will be a row of trees now here which has their reflection in the water. So what I do is I'll use again the same mixture, my Payne's Grey and my ultramarine blue, and I will make with one quick stroke, I'll try to make the trees. Keep your hand very, very steady and do this with the tip of your brush. Try to keep them as thin as possible. So they will be more or less similar in height. Made some of them really short. So not this exactly the same height, but more or less similar. So now first let's make the shadows in the water. I know it looks really funny now without the leaves and the branches, but this is a far more easier thing to do right now because you know where each tree is and where the reflection is going to be. So you just need to drop one more tree trunk from the base of that tree. Now it's the final thing to do, making the leaves. So that's how the leaves of these trees are like. So I'll keep on working on the tree. So trying to put in some dots like the leaves, so it'll be gradually tapering at the top. So I'm just working with the tip of my brush here, and at the bottom the trees only have the branches, the empty branches which don't have the leaves. So I am keeping working on the trees. Continuing to work. So if you notice, some of the branches have now dried and they're looking really light in color. So I'm just going over them with a little bit of my Payne's Gray to make them a little darker. So try not to rush while doing the leaves. I know it's kind of makes one impatient. But remember that this is something that's going to make it look very real, so it's important that you keep doing the branches and stems and everything. So wherever there are 2 or 3 trees grouped together, you can actually do them together as well. It wouldn't matter. Just remember to keep the tops really sharp and conical. So we are almost halfway done with the trees. And I'm kind of doing this a little faster now. So I'm at the last edge doing the trees. Just a few more left here. So keep the leaves very loose. And see, the bottom layer has dried really lighter. So I'm putting in a little bit of my darker shades here. So you can let the foreground remain lighter and only put the darker shades here and there, not everywhere. Because I don't want the foreground to be one monotonous shade of gray or black or blue. These are the last 2 trees which I'm doing. Okay. So my background is almost bluish and I let it be blue. Just the border a little more on the gray side. And I'll try to define the branches here a little more. So that's more or less how I want it to look. I'm sure you'll enjoy painting something like this from memory or from a photograph. Whichever it is. I love sunsets and I love doing these reflections. So that's how it looks now. And see, the sky has dried and the clouds look really cool. So in the foreground here, it's all looking very similar. So I'll just make a few more branches here and there. Remember, it has to be really thin. And I want to make a few darker grasses here. With the pointed, sharp edge of this. Okay. So that's more or less it. I'm sure you can try this. Now let's see how it looks. Moment of truth. So that's our painting.